So I think as children, we all do some form of art. Our parents give us crayons, they give us bits of paper, and to a greater or lesser extent, we all enjoy art. And then you start getting a little bit older and suddenly things sort of change a bit. But I was always quite artistic as a kid, and I think in the back of my mind, I thought maybe I could be an artist. I didn't know what that meant, but maybe I could be an artist. But my mother knew better, obviously. She said, under no circumstances could I become an artist. And I think that's probably a judgment on my art at the time as well. But she wanted me to get a proper job. And of course, back in those days, you did listen to your parents or get thrown out, of course. So I applied for a job. Actually, I didn't want to apply, but my parents made me apply for a job in banking. And I got it, much to my disappointment, really. But there it was. I found myself in banking, and that was the job that I had for nearly 40 years, which has, cutting to the chase now, ultimately enabled me to do what I do now, which is be an artist. I remember being in the bank early days and thinking, this isn't for me, blah, blah, blah. And then there was a chance to do some exams. I don't want to do those. And then I thought, what if I'm still in banking in a couple of years' time and I've not done anything to sort of improve my prospects? So I thought, I'll just take the exams. And suddenly you start finding that, I found that I was getting the exams, I started getting promotions, and suddenly it did turn into a career that maybe I didn't want, but actually, turned into something that was actually quite good in the end. Sometimes just to decide where my horizon will be, whether I want a high horizon or a low horizon, get different perspectives, to try and loosen it up really. So that's the one down to Maiden Coombe. Not there yet. And this is from our weekend down in Cornwall. This is Withian. So that's just some base layers down there really, and some scumbling here, which worked out sort of quite effective, I thought. I want the sun coming out behind these clouds so that all this is silhouetted. So I want the light coming, could be a complete disaster. Right, I've got the right size brushes. So I'm Peter Blakesley. I've been a professional artist now for about 8 years, but obviously I was painting and creating before that. I think I've always been quite artistic, but family and other commitments and career sort of take over and take you in slightly different directions. But as the kids got older, I was able to paint more again, steal myself away, and I knew then that as that was growing, that I wanted to dedicate myself to being full-time in art, as an artist, as a painter. But I think that's, the motivation just comes really from where we live in Devon, the scenery, the colours, the seascapes, the moors, everything around us is just very, very inspiring. So I'm married, I've got 2 children, I've got a dog. All that seems very average, doesn't it? But now I'm a lovey-dovey artist. So my early memories of art would be, I think I was given some oil paints, and I would have been about 9 or 10. And I remember playing around with those, and I painted a picture for my nana, which she hung on her wall. I mean, at the time, I thought it was quite good. Of course, when she died, it was gifted back to me. I think we've still got it in a loft somewhere, but probably doesn't bear scrutiny. My lifeline. This is something I can't do without ever. and was inspired. I was sat in New York cafe once, not knowing anything about coffee, and I saw the board and thought, oh, I'll have one of those cappuccinos. I had no idea what it was, but I've drunk nothing since. Absolutely love my coffee to get me going in the morning. So I want to put the sun here. And I think that's, like I said earlier, that having done lots of paintings, you get to know whether it might or might not work. Sometimes it doesn't, you just go, and you don't have someone filming you, so you just go, oh, I'll start again. But I think that's the good thing about experimenting. See, anyone that's drawing really, really tight can't experiment that much because you're really in there with the detail. And by the time you've done that bit and moved on to the next bit, it's a bit late to sort of take a complete brush and go right over it again. Whereas some of my best watercolours, I'd have got so far through and thought this isn't working, and you just put a complete wash over it sometimes and it would transform it. That pop of pink, and I might just use a palette knife to give me some nice touches. So working in banking isn't exactly aligned to being artistic, but what it has done, I think, and you never get away from this, is it brings a lot of discipline to you as a person, a lot of structure to you as a person, and that becomes part of your DNA. You can't get away from that as much as you want to be very, very spontaneous all the time. So whether that inhibits me, who knows? I don't think it does, because I like to be quite creative. I like to try new things, and what I think I can do is use those skills to help in promoting my art. So about 5 or 6 years ago, I was just sort of contemplating my navel, thinking, well, where's my art going? What am I going to do? I was involved in the Torbay Guild of Artists. I was displaying down there, and all that was fine, but I suddenly thought, well, why don't I bring more of a business approach to this? Why don't I think of having a plan? And I did. I sort of wrote down an outline of a plan as to how I would promote my work better, how I would promote my work outside of Devon as well, because Devon is, quite a small county, and looked at areas where, I could just get my name out there. So I did that with great success, to be honest. So maybe that's how my work has in the past helped. So when I was working, I was doing quite a lot of watercolour art. There's some paintings around here, because that was quite immediate, and I just got into watercolours. Now I'm going to start getting lots of paintings out. But that was one of my quite early on watercolours that won some prizes. That's actually a copy, because the original sold. But I knew I started liking street scenes and the perspective of the vanishing point and disappearing, and that's what sort of features in some of these as well, doesn't it? The fact that you're looking down a street. That's what I'm quite proud of. It's my father. He didn't like it. I did a portrait of, which is a doctor actually. During COVID, there was this thing that went out, probably on Instagram, about in the artistic world that you would offer to do a portrait of a doctor because we just wanted to support doctors and nurses. And I put myself out there, and this particular doctor asked if I would do it with them, and she was the first person in, so I said yes, of course I will. And I painted what I thought was a reasonable painting of her. She's never said quite these words, but she probably hated it. Well, she admitted after a little while of reflection that she didn't like pictures of herself.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
And I think, you know, sometimes you do look at stuff of yourself and think it might be absolutely you, but if you don't like it, you don't like it. That's me. That's me when I was at work. What's my wife? Gosh, I've forgotten about this. When I stopped working, I obviously had more time, and that's when I thought, well, I'd get into oils again, go back to oils, and because I had more time. So I sort of moved away from watercolour painting, apart from the odd commission, which I still do. I turned entirely to oils, and then I discovered acrylics. And I think there's a bit of snobbery around oils versus acrylics. And I think I've proved this because I've had people say to me, is that oil or acrylics? And I've told them it's oil, even though it's acrylics. And they've said, I knew it was. So, yeah, I think that there's a lot of guff around all that sort of stuff. Of course, you can get oils now that are water-based. They don't smell and they do dry quicker. So my argument about speed is probably a little bit out of date. I could go back to oils, but I'm just very comfortable with acrylics. I just use the medium as it comes out of the tube. So I think I enjoy when I've got something in mind that I need to do. So that could be a commission. Obviously that focuses the mind. It makes you do research, and also normally gives you a bit of a time frame to get something done, and that's good. Also, if a gallery asks me for so many paintings, I know that I need to crack on with that, and that's a good thing as well. I enjoy coming into the studio. I lose myself for however long I want to lose myself for. Sometimes it can be a whole day. Other times it's just an hour before I go out doing other things. I just think, right, I'll just put a little bit of paint on today, and that's fine as well. Actually, having said I like doing commissions because it gives me a time frame, I actually hate commissions, let's be honest, let's put it out there. Because obviously one of the things I'm going to ask the person that wants this commissioned me is, well, what is it you want? And they generally say, well, you know, just a painting of something nice, maybe give me a subject. And then of course when you drill down a little bit further, then they start getting quite specific as to what they want. And suddenly it doesn't become my art anymore if it goes over the line. I often used to get asked, I did some portraiture, still do some portraiture, and people would say, I've got this fantastic photo of the whole family. And oh, whole family, that's like 10 people. That's like 10 bits of art. No. Here's... Yes, so my oil paints are on this side, my acrylics on that side. My watercolours are in a different drawer again now because they haven't seen the light of day for a little while. My brushes and other instruments, and goodness knows what you might find in there. I don't know why I'm not happy with it, but this isn't feeling right to me. It could be that that's too much of a V. I need to cut right across there. Like that. And also another good thing, well, something I do quite often, but always, the next day you come down, fresh eyes and that, and you go, whoa, that's not right, but suddenly you can see what you do need to do. So it's very seldom I'd finish a painting in a day, because you need that next day fresh eyes, I think. But what I shall end up doing is putting some rays, which will come out sort of like this as well, to give you that. You know when you take a photo sometimes into the light and you get, when you look at it back, there's a little blue mark or a little circle, isn't there? I often put those in my paintings as well. In fact, I'm still toying with the idea of entering the Portrait Artist of the Year. It's one of my favourite programmes on the television, Sky Arts. And last year, my wife and I went up to Battersea to see it being filmed, and it was a really, really good experience. And yeah, it's encouraged me to think maybe I could have a go at doing that. It's a frustrating process because how I see somebody might not be how they see themselves. So it's a kind of, yeah, sometimes they don't work out as I would hope they would, and I start again. Well, I don't think there's that many art shows on, are there? I don't think. I mean, maybe there are and I just missed them. But portrait artists and landscape artists, I just think they're brilliant, because you just see different people. I mean, judges always pick the wrong people, obviously, but you do get to see a big variety, don't you, and sort of different ways of painting. And I think that's really informative. So the inspiration comes from everywhere. Living in Devon has got to be the key inspiration for most of my artwork. Having said that, I've done paintings of London, Edinburgh and Bath and many other places, but just living here, there's so much to like, and you know, we try not to take it for granted. And I think as you wander around, as you go out, I sea swim, so I'm down on the beach quite often, and you get a day like today where it's sunny as well, and the inspiration just comes at you. You sort of, in fact, this week we were down in Cornwall on a beach, sun, blue sky, water war, low sun, sort of backlight against rocks and that inspired quite a lot of paintings which I've started this week. So yeah, inspiration can come from anything, but yeah, mostly nature. So traveling, we've got a camper van, so man with van, and we do enjoy going down to Cornwall and Devon, parts of Devon that we don't know overly well still, and luckily Cornwall isn't too far away, so we can choose when the weather's going to be reasonably good, and off we go. And I've also got a gallery down in Cornwall that stock my work, so that's a good excuse to get down there as well. Yeah, I think the sort of the idea of it is probably better than the reality of it. And we've got a VW camper van. Yeah, you've got to be quite organised, and you know, two of you and a dog, you all have to turn over and breathe and move at the same time. And if it's raining, it's, you know, I'm talking about the downsides. The upsides, of course, are when it's sunny and lovely and warm. It's just great. It's just fantastic. Sometimes I don't actually know until I start painting. I always start with obviously a blank canvas, and I usually give that a coat of a particular colour, which may or may not influence, you know, the way the painting goes and the colour of that painting. But it's a base layer, so that I'm not painting against white. I do have some favourite colours. I know they work well. I know that for some reason pink is very popular, and that will help sell a painting. But I don't do it just for that. It's what, you know, what works well together. And I do experiment with different things. I've got some very off the wall colour paintings, some Marmite paintings, as you might say, that I've had people say, no, I don't like the colour of that. But equally, I've had more people say that is just brilliant. So yeah, no, I think I'd encourage any artist to try different palettes and different colours and not stick to the same all the time.
Do the traditional landscape colours.
So this is a Marmite painting. I can't believe it hasn't sold. And I don't mean that in a, look at my painting, how great it is, but so many people have said how much they love this painting. But I can't get it over the line of it selling. So it's based, as a lot of my paintings are, on a place. This is the Tean Estuary, looking down to Teignmouth and Sheldon from Newton Abbot. Actually, there's a walkway used to run along here, but clearly the colours are not real. They're artistic license, as is, you know, the actual painting itself. But yeah, that won't be everyone's cup of tea. Some people have very set ways of painting, very set styles. Something I quite enjoy doing is changing it up and doing something a bit different and experimenting, as I said. And this one came out of a trip we had to Scotland. You said about my colour palette. Clearly that doesn't have a colour palette. It's very moody and dark. But I had done one, it was still Scotland, quite big like this, and I took it up to Bath Art Fair. And a friend of mine was coming to Bath Art Fair from Salisbury, and he said, "Oh, I'd like to have a look at any of your paintings you've got of Scotland." So I thought, I've got one, I'll take this. And they were coming on the Sunday. On the Friday night, I thought, well, I've got to display it, and I put, I'm not going to say a ridiculous price on it, but I put a higher price than I was going to charge my friend if he'd wanted it. And the chap came in and within minutes bought it and took it away. But it's sort of, it's quite interesting that price isn't always a factor. If somebody likes a painting, they will pay a price. I had another one of Dartmoor, actually, quite dark, which sold at the next Bath Art Fair, big one like that. And the chap said, would I deliver it to his house, which I did. And this is my claim to fame. He took down a David Hockney to put my painting up.
Oh my god.
So
That is a big statement.
big statement.
Yeah. My god.
I hope people are inspired by my work. The feedback I get when I do exhibitions and fairs. I guess most people are going to say nice things to you. I don't think they'd come up and say something horrible, but sometimes you can stand by your work and not say who you are, and you listen to people talking about your work, and you always get a real buzz if it's positive, and I have to say it is positive. So I hope they're inspired. I hope they love it. They'll love it for different reasons. I can remember somebody once buying one of my paintings and saying it matched their curtains, and you know, hey, who am I to argue? It probably did. So my advice to anyone that's exploring being an artist, or that they are an artist, is to just keep painting if painting is their art. You don't become a really good artist by holding back and only doing something that you think is going to be perfection. You won't get perfection very often. And a bit like playing a musical instrument, you need to keep practicing and practicing. And eventually over time, your artwork evolves. Hopefully it gets better. It should get better. And it's spending the time doing it. That's not always easy, I appreciate. I went to some art classes when I was working in a proper job, and I'm not sure I learned an awful lot, except it made me spend an hour or two every week painting, which had to be good. So in itself, that was really useful. So I just encourage somebody to keep painting and keep trying and experimenting, and not stick with the same things, and look at other art and get inspiration from that.